More now on the Liberal Democrats' dramatic victory in the Chesham and Amersham by-election. Their candidate, Sarah Green, won the seat by more than 8,000 votes, overturning a Conservative majority of 16,000. The leader of the Lib Dems, Sir Ed Davey, says the result sends shockwaves through British politics and was a clear sign that the Tory blue wall was crumbling. Boris Johnson has described the defeat as disappointing. Well, let's take a look at what the implications could be of this by-election. Let's talk to the Financial Times Whitehall editor Sebastian Payne and the chief leader writer at the Observer newspaper, Sonia Sodha. Hello to you both. Thanks for joining us. Before we get into it, we're just going to play you a clip of Ed Davey. And there he is, smashing down the blue wall with an appropriately coloured yellow hammer. There he is. Now, Sebastian, is this sort of, I don't know, over-exuberance? Was he just, I don't know, drunk on champagne? Or was this a serious analysis, potentially, of where the future could lie when it comes to the Liberal Democrats making gains at the expense of the Conservatives?
It's a super interesting question, and to be honest, we don't fully know the answer to that yet, because the Liberal Democrats haven't made many gains or have had much to celebrate about in politics in recent years. But this by-election, they really threw the kitchen sink at it. 1 in 5 Liberal Democrat activists now live in London, and I think they all spent every spare moment in that constituency trying to win the by-election. And they did it by focusing on a very core issue, which is planning. That the Johnson government is planning to reform the England's planning laws, to liberalise them, to make it easier to build on big parts of the country. And the fact is, that's very unpopular in the Chilterns and the area of outstanding natural beauty where Chesham and Amersham is based. The Lib Dems came in and said, we will protect your green and pleasant land, and it proved very popular, combined with the fact the Conservative campaign in this by-election, unlike Hartlepool, was appalling.
Yeah, I mean, Sonia, lots of talk about local issues like planning and HS2, but the planning rules are nationwide. HS2 cuts across the whole of the country. There is a sense, potentially among some Tory voters, that this Boris Johnson incarnation of the party is not as socially liberal, perhaps, as David Cameron's version of the Conservative Party, cutting back on spending when it comes to foreign aid. The idea that they're not as hot on keeping the books balanced when it comes to finances and so on and so forth. Is there a sense that this party has changed for grassroots Conservatives, and as a result, that's why the Liberal Democrats can make hay?
I think that's right, and I think what this by-election result is more evidence of is a bit of a realignment that's going on in British politics. So just as Labour's losing support in its heartland seats, as epitomised by them losing the Hartlepool by-election, I think this is further evidence that we also saw in the local election results that the Conservatives are losing support in some of their heartland areas, with in particular the Liberal Democrats and the Greens making some quite good progress in the local elections. This was a really extraordinary swing for the Lib Dems. Seb is right, of course, that local issues were to the fore, but it can't explain the extent of the Liberal Democrat victory, I think. And I think there will be lots of Conservative MPs in the South who look at this and feel a bit worried. And I think it's the result of some quite long trends we're seeing in British politics, which is that we've moved from quite a sort of unidimensional electorate where people arrange themselves on a left-right spectrum. And if you were left economically, you were probably kind of left on the sort of socially conservative, socially liberal spectrum. And I think those two sort of spectrums have started to move apart from each other. And the latter one, so whether you're socially conservative or socially liberal, has started to become more important. And if you look at towns like Amersham and Chesham, they have a lot of university graduates, a lot of people who kind of commute from London. And these are people who might have once voted Conservative, but who don't seem to be attracted to the party in quite the same way. So I think it's the flip side of Labour's problem in its heartland seats. You could see the Conservatives, and, there's been analysis that's been done which looks at, even with just a 10% swing from Conservatives to the Liberal Democrats, there is something in the region of sort of 20 or so seats that the Conservatives could lose in the South East, including some of, very significant cabinet ministers like Dominic Raab and Jeremy Hunt. So I do think these are warning signs for the Conservatives that their strategy of picking very divisive culture wars may not be landing well with voters right across the country, and they don't help them keep that coalition of newer voters that they're winning in Labour heartland seats together with voters in traditional Conservative heartlands.
Right.
It's very hard for them to keep that together.
Sure. Briefly, Sebastian, I mean, is there something a little bit sad about the idea that you can be a Labour government, coalition government, or a Conservative government, and you can't appeal to everyone the way that you really would like? That if you concentrate on people in the north, you're going to upset people in the south. And with Labour, it's the other way around. And there's a sense that you're not really a national party. Is there something, frankly, tragic in that?
True, and I don't quite agree with what Sonia just said there, that I think that this by-election, yes, it was to do with local issues, and as I said, I think the Tories ran a bad campaign, and they've done it at an exact moment where all of their policy focus is on the north of England, and the Conservative campaigners in Chesham and Amersham, they didn't really have a message to give an active reason to vote for the party again. But I would almost bet that seat will go back to the Conservatives at the next election, because I think Boris Johnson is quite deft at pivoting on politics. At the moment, he's focused on seats like Hartlepool and Batley and Spen in West Yorkshire. We've got another by-election coming there on July the 1st. But I don't really think people in Chesham and Amersham were voting against Conservatives because they're concerned about the government's rhetoric on flags or statues. I think it was on a very specific set of local issues. I think the Conservatives do potentially face longer-term problems. And as Sonia said, there are economic and cultural things to look at in the future. But right now, I still think the nearest thing to a one-nation party that can appeal to all parts of the UK is still the Conservatives.
Well, I sincerely hope, Sebastian, that you're going to eat your hat like one of your colleagues who made a prediction about this by-election, and he got it wrong. And you're convinced it will go back to the Tories at the election? I'll talk to you in 3 years' time, my brother. OK, Sonia, Sebastian, thanks for joining us. Thank you both.